Right now, at this exact moment, the United States Fifth Fleet is conducting emergency evacuation procedures from Naval Support Activity Bahrain, the headquarters that has anchored American naval power in the Persian Gulf for 78 years. U.S. Central Command issued a terse two-sentence statement at 0430 hours local time, confirming the relocation of critical personnel and assets to undisclosed alternative locations. Iran's foreign ministry spokesman declared this morning that Tehran's strategic patience has achieved what 2 decades of diplomatic protests could not accomplish. One military command says this is a temporary tactical adjustment for force protection. One regional adversary claims this represents America's retreat from its most strategically vital naval installation in the Middle East. These contradictory narratives cannot both be true, and the difference between tactical relocation and strategic withdrawal will determine the balance of power across the Persian Gulf for the next generation. Let me walk you through exactly what happened in the 72 hours that forced the United States to abandon its primary forward operating base in one of the world's most contested waterways. On Tuesday, March 3rd, at 1420 hours Bahrain time, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps naval forces conducted what Tehran called a routine training exercise involving 12 fast attack craft and 2 Ghadir-class midget submarines operating 48 nautical miles northeast of Manama. U.S. Fifth Fleet tracking systems identified the vessels but assessed no immediate threat given the distance from Bahraini territorial waters. At 22:15 hours that same evening, Iranian state television broadcast footage showing mobile Fateh 110 short-range ballistic missile launchers being positioned at 3 locations along Iran's southern coast, directly across the Gulf from Bahrain. The broadcast included animated graphics depicting missile trajectories that terminated precisely at coordinates matching Naval Support Activity Bahrain's location. At 0230 hours on Wednesday morning, Bahrain's Ministry of Interior reported multiple drone incursions over the capital city of Manama, with at least 2 unmanned aerial vehicles conducting surveillance patterns over the diplomatic quarter where both the U.S. Embassy and the naval base administrative facilities are located. Bahraini air defense systems tracked but did not engage the drones, which departed Bahraini airspace after 47 minutes. At 0600 hours Wednesday, Iran's Supreme National Security Council released an unprecedented statement declaring that American military facilities within 200 kilometers of Iranian territory represent legitimate targets for preemptive defensive action if Washington proceeds with planned strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. The statement specifically named 3 installations, including Naval Support Activity Bahrain, Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, and Al Dhafra Air Base in the United Arab Emirates. By Wednesday afternoon, U.S. intelligence agencies detected increased communications activity between Iranian military commands and proxy forces in Iraq, Syria, and Yemen, suggesting coordinated action planning across multiple theaters. Thursday morning brought the development that transformed this crisis from theoretical threat to operational reality. At 0400 hours local time, a massive explosion occurred at a Bahraini fuel depot located 7 kilometers from the U.S. naval base, sending flames visible from 20 kilometers away and triggering immediate lockdown procedures at the installation. Bahraini authorities are investigating the cause, but preliminary assessments suggest sabotage rather than accident given the facility's modern safety systems and maintenance record. Within 90 minutes of that explosion, U.S. Central Command initiated what it describes as a planned relocation of non-essential personnel and selected equipment to alternative facilities. To understand the strategic significance of what's occurring, you need to understand what Naval Support Activity Bahrain represents in American military architecture. This is the operational headquarters of the United States Fifth Fleet, maintaining responsibility for naval operations across 2.5 million square miles of water, including the Persian Gulf, Red Sea, Arabian Sea, and Indian Ocean. The facility hosts approximately 8,000 American military personnel, operates as the primary logistics hub supporting carrier strike groups, and serves as forward command post coordinating destroyers, cruisers, and littoral combat ships in waters Iran claims as its exclusive sphere. Located just 270 kilometers from Iran's southern coast, this base provides permanent forward presence, cutting transit times for regional crises by days compared to distant installations. Infrastructure includes deep-water piers for aircraft carriers, command facilities with satellite uplinks, ammunition storage, and repair shops. Replacing this capability cannot happen on 72 hours' notice without massive operational degradation. Iran has understood this vulnerability for years, which is why Tehran has invested heavily in capabilities specifically designed to threaten American installations in the Gulf region. The Fateh 110 missiles that Iranian television displayed earlier this week have a range of 300 kilometers, more than sufficient to reach Bahrain from launch sites on Iran's southern coast. These aren't crude, unguided rockets. The Fateh 110 is a solid-fuel, short-range ballistic missile with an inertial guidance system achieving circular error probable of approximately 100 meters, meaning half of all missiles fired will impact within 100 meters of the aim point. The latest variants incorporate terminal guidance, allowing course corrections during the final descent phase, significantly improving accuracy against stationary targets like port facilities and command buildings. Each missile carries a 650-kilogram high-explosive warhead capable of causing catastrophic damage to hardened structures. Iran maintains an estimated inventory of several hundred Fateh 110 missiles, along with more advanced variants, including the Fateh 313, with improved range and accuracy. The strategic calculus is straightforward. A saturation attack involving dozens of missiles launched simultaneously would overwhelm Bahrain's air defense systems and could render the naval base non-operational for weeks or months, even if only a fraction of missiles reach their targets. American Patriot batteries deployed in Bahrain can intercept ballistic missiles, but the systems have limited magazine depth and require time to reload between engagements. If Iran launches 20 missiles and Patriot systems successfully intercept 15, the 5 warheads that penetrate defenses still deliver over 3,000 kilograms of explosives onto American facilities. Here's why this matters strategically beyond the immediate military calculations. For 4 decades since the Iranian Revolution in 1979, American military presence in the Persian Gulf has operated on the assumption that Iran's threats remained largely rhetorical posturing rather than imminent action. That assumption justified forward-basing American forces on Iran's doorstep, despite the obvious vulnerability. Tehran absorbed years of sanctions, military pressure, and occasionally kinetic strikes on Iranian forces and proxies, while refraining from direct attacks on American bases in the Gulf region. That restraint appears to be ending. From Iran's perspective, the strategic logic is clear. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei faces domestic political pressure from hardliners who view the nuclear negotiations as weakness and demand concrete action demonstrating Iranian power. The Iranian economy continues deteriorating under sustained sanctions pressure, and the regime needs victories that justify the population's suffering to its domestic audience. Intelligence assessments suggest that Iranian leadership believes the United States is preparing military strikes targeting Iran's nuclear facilities, possibly coordinated with Israeli operations. In this context, forcing American forces to withdraw from forward bases through the threat of attack achieves multiple Iranian objectives simultaneously. It reduces American power projection capability in the region by complicating logistics and increasing response times. It demonstrates to regional partners that alignment with Washington provides no protection against Iranian pressure. It shows the Iranian population that the regime can achieve strategic victories against the world's most powerful military through asymmetric warfare. Most importantly, it forces American decision-makers to confront the actual costs of military conflict with Iran, rather than operating under assumptions that American forces can strike with impunity while their own bases remain immune from retaliation. According to Dr. Michael Eisenstadt, Director of Military and Security Studies at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, Iran's strategy represents a calculated escalation designed to change the regional security architecture without crossing thresholds that would trigger full American military retaliation. The distinction between harassing American forces enough to complicate operations versus attacking them in ways that cause mass casualties represents Tehran's strategic balancing act. Forcing evacuation through threat and demonstration of capability achieves Iranian objectives while avoiding the catastrophic American response that would follow if dozens of American sailors died in missile attacks. From Washington's perspective, the calculation is agonizing. Maintaining forces at Naval Support Activity Bahrain under credible threat of Iranian attack means accepting risks to American military personnel that become politically untenable if attacks actually occur. But relocating those forces appears to validate Iran's strategy and encourage further pressure against other American installations in the region. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin would face congressional interrogation about why American forces were positioned in vulnerable locations if Iranian missiles strike the Bahrain facility. But he would also face congressional interrogation about why American forces abandoned their posts if the relocation appears as retreat under pressure. The United States is attempting to frame this movement as temporary tactical adjustment rather than strategic withdrawal. But regional partners are drawing their own conclusions about American staying power when confronted with determined regional adversaries. There are three possible scenarios for how this situation develops over the next 2 to 4 weeks. Scenario 1 represents diplomatic de-escalation pathway with approximately 32% probability. In this scenario, the United States and Iran use back-channel communications to establish understandings that prevent further escalation. Washington quietly acknowledges that forward basing in immediate proximity to Iran carries risks that may not justify the marginal operational advantages, while Tehran gains the domestic political victory of forcing American adjustment without having to actually strike American forces and trigger full-scale military confrontation. Over several months, the United States gradually shifts Fifth Fleet operations to facilities in Qatar and the United Arab Emirates that offer greater standoff distance from Iranian missile threats. Iran declares this movement as strategic victory, while avoiding actions that would force Washington into military response that neither side actually wants. For this scenario to materialize, both sides need diplomatic off-ramps that allow them to claim victory to domestic audiences while actually compromising on core positions. The obstacle is that neither Tehran nor Washington can easily explain retreat from maximalist rhetoric without appearing weak to constituencies that demand confrontation. Scenario 2 involves controlled military escalation with approximately 43% probability. This pathway includes limited Iranian attacks on evacuated American facilities designed to demonstrate capability without causing casualties that would necessitate massive American retaliation. Iran might launch missiles at specific buildings at Naval Support Activity Bahrain after ensuring, through intelligence channels, that the structures are empty, or conduct cyber attacks that disrupt operations without causing deaths. The United States responds with limited strikes on Iranian military facilities, possibly targeting missile launchers or Revolutionary Guard naval bases, while both sides ensure that actions remain below thresholds triggering full conflict. This controlled escalation allows both regimes to demonstrate resolve to domestic audiences while avoiding catastrophic war that neither can afford economically or politically. The risk is that escalation dynamics develop their own momentum beyond leadership control, particularly if Iranian proxies in Iraq or Yemen conduct attacks that cause American casualties. Scenario 3 represents catastrophic escalation pathway with approximately 25% probability. In this nightmare scenario, Iranian hardliners or Revolutionary Guard commanders proceed with major attacks on American facilities, believing they can deter American retaliation through threats of even greater escalation, including closure of the Strait of Hormuz or activation of Hezbollah against Israel. If significant American casualties occur, President Biden faces overwhelming domestic political pressure for massive retaliation that could include strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities, oil infrastructure, and potentially regime leadership targets. Iran responds by attacking shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, through which 21% of global oil supplies flow, launching missiles at Saudi and Emirati oil facilities, and activating proxy forces across the region. Within 1 week, oil prices spike above $130 per barrel. The global economy enters recession, and the Middle East erupts in the widest military conflict since Operation Desert Storm in 1991. This scenario becomes likely if either side fundamentally miscalculates the other's red lines, or if accidents and fog of war create casualties that force escalation beyond what leaders intended. Watch for 5 critical indicators in the next 72 to 96 hours that will reveal which scenario is materializing. First, monitor American military asset movements across the region. If additional forces evacuate from Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar or Al Dhafra in the United Arab Emirates, that signals Washington's assessment that Iranian threats extend beyond Bahrain and that broader regional withdrawal may be necessary. If instead the United States deploys additional Patriot batteries or THAAD missile defense systems to remaining bases, that indicates intention to hold positions rather than retreat further. Second, watch Iranian domestic messaging carefully. If Supreme Leader Khamenei or President Raisi give major speeches in the next week, their language will reveal whether Tehran views this as sufficient victory or whether they intend to press advantages through additional pressure. Triumphalist rhetoric suggesting American weakness invites further action, while measured statements about defensive success achieved through strength suggest Iranian willingness to de-escalate. Third, monitor diplomatic communications. If the State Department announces that Special Envoy for Iran is traveling to Oman or another neutral location for talks, that signals both sides seek off-ramps. If instead diplomatic silence continues, that suggests neither side has identified pathway to resolution short of further escalation. Fourth, observe regional partner behaviors. If Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, or other Gulf Cooperation Council states begin distancing themselves from American positions or opening direct communications with Tehran, that reveals their assessment that American commitment to regional security is weakening. If they instead increase coordination with Washington and harden their own defensive postures, that suggests continued confidence in American staying power. Fifth, watch global oil markets. If prices stabilize or decline from current levels, that indicates markets believe conflict risk is moderating. If prices continue climbing above $95 per barrel, that shows traders are pricing in substantial probability of military action that disrupts Gulf oil production or shipping. The United States Fifth Fleet just abandoned its headquarters for the first time since the installation opened in 1948. Iran is celebrating this as validation of its missile threat strategy and demonstration that American military power cannot operate with impunity in Iran's neighborhood. Subscribe to this channel right now and turn on all notifications because this situation is developing hour by hour, and you need to understand what happens next before mainstream media even recognizes the story's significance. I'm tracking every satellite image showing American asset movements, monitoring every statement from Iranian leadership, analyzing every diplomatic signal that might indicate whether we're heading toward de-escalation or war. When the next development breaks, when evacuations expand to other bases, or when the first missiles fly, you'll understand it here first with the technical analysis and strategic context you cannot get from 30-second news clips. Hit that subscribe button now, drop a comment, and tell me what you think. Do you believe this represents temporary tactical adjustment or the beginning of American withdrawal from forward positions in the Gulf? Do you think Iran will launch actual attacks, or has Tehran achieved its objectives through threat alone? Do you assess that Biden will order military strikes, or will Washington accept this strategic setback to avoid wider war? I read every comment, and I want to hear your analysis of where this crisis is heading. The Fifth Fleet has left its home. Iran just changed the strategic map of the Persian Gulf. The next 96 hours will determine whether American power in the region can be reconstituted or whether this represents the beginning of a fundamental realignment in Middle Eastern security architecture. Thanks for watching. Everything just changed. The clock is ticking.